All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Masterclass 1, Founders Mindset, Team Management and Communication. Today we have the mentor and speaker for today's session, Mr. Simon Anthropos, joining us. Simon, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you all for attending. It's been quite a while since I did one of these masterclasses, so please excuse me if I'm a little bit rusty. We probably won't need the full 2 hours today, so it'll be good to give you guys a little bit of time back in your calendars. I know how important time is. Having run startups multiple times before. So basically what I'll do before we jump into the deck, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I know Nash gave me a very nice intro and an overview there, so I'll just give you a few more details. So I've been living in Malaysia for 14 years now. I left the UK 27 years ago, moved to Spain, 4 years over there, 10 years in Prague in the Czech Republic, where I set up my first startup in 2007, 2008. And then after 10 years there, 14 years here. So, yeah, there was a couple of years back in the UK in between Spain and the Czech Republic. But yeah, predominantly I've worked in the tech space and more specifically recruitment tech and HR tech. So a couple of my startups have been CRM, ATS platforms. My first startup in the Czech Republic was a job board, so something similar to Hiredly or Wob, JobStreet, but yeah, a long time ago before social media marketing and Facebook ads and things like that. So slightly different approach there. And then yeah, since then I've done 2 or 3 startups, 2 digital, 1 physical in terms of a recruitment agency, which I would never ever do again and don't recommend anyone else to do. But yeah, the rec tech ones have gone quite well, and what I tend to do is get involved, get them to a place where they need to be, and then flip them, either sell my shares to my co-founders, or we go for a commercial sale and we all get out at the same time. So without further ado, what I'll do today is I'll share my screen. Give me a second. Just before we start, anybody got any questions for me? Okay, silence is golden. No news is good news, so I'll crack on. Please do, before I start, if I am talking too fast or my accent's a little bit too much for you, just tell me to calm down and slow down, and it'll be fine. So, okay. Sorry, give me a sec. Just going to turn my camera off. I don't like presenting when I'm on camera because I pull funny faces when I'm talking. Okay, there we go. So yeah, basically, as you guys will already know, today's masterclass is on unlocking startup success. So talking about founders mindset, team management, including sort of building a core team. I think last cohort I did was predominantly around building a core team, how to hire apple for apple, and looking at, you know, how you get consistency throughout the team in terms of talent attraction and retention. There may be a separate session, but we'll have a decent oversight of that today, and then communication in terms of how you guys communicate with your teams. Okay, so like I say, this is the first session, founders mindset, how to develop resilience, clarity, confidence in our challenges, team management, and like I say, build, lead, and nurture. Nurture is really important in terms of retention. Startups with higher retention rates tend to have higher success rates, especially in terms of talent attraction and revenue generation. And then, yeah, impactful comms. Impactful being the key word there. Sometimes saying less is more, and we can tend to sort of over communicate. So, you know, just being sort of precise and getting to the point and direct. And again, in terms of when you meet people and bring people on board into your startups, just making sure they know how you communicate Because some people will be like, oh, that guy's really rude. And it's like 9 times out of 10, the person isn't rude. It's just the way they communicate. It could be a one-line email, which does drive me crazy. But some people are really time sensitive. So, you know, learning about how we communicate and how we explain to other people how we communicate as well. All right. So in terms of outcomes, this is what we should be looking at learning today. Adopting these mindset strategies, overcoming the hurdles, and, you know, what we'll do, rather than leaving this to a Q&A at the end, once we get into the nitty gritty, if anybody does have a question, please just speak up, yeah, and we'll deal with it as we go, rather than people having to take notes all the way through and then doing a QA session at the end. There'll still be time for questions at the end, but like I say, if there's a point that we raise and it's something that's close to you or happened to you or happening to you, or you perceive it's going to happen to you in the near or far future, and you want to get a little bit of a sort of double down on it, specifically catered towards your situation, then yeah, we'll do it as we go. All right. Again, understanding our leadership and communication styles better, and then looking at defining and refining your missions, goals, and core values. And I'll deep dive into that a little bit more. We'll double down on it, but a lot of people don't think they need these because they're not Microsoft or Google or whatever, but it's very, very important, especially when we look at scalability and talent attraction. Having these things in place, so it, almost like a mantra from day one, is how you'll build your employer brand. So like I say, a lot of startups I've seen overlook these because they're like, oh, there's only 3, 4, or 5 of us. But if you instill those missions, goals, and core values from day one, and everybody coming in lives by them, then you will have a lot less headaches in the future. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. Okay. So the founder's mindset. So what sets successful founders apart? So for me, it fits into these sort of 4 pillars here. I would say from my background and my experience, grit and resilience, I would imagine everybody on this call has got that. And visionary thinking as well. You know, you're all startup founders. You've all got some kind of product, hopefully all at MVP at least by now, and can see where that's going. The second 2, I would say, are probably for slightly more mature startup founders or startup founders, co-founders that have actually been through this before. The seeing failure as a learning opportunity can be really, really difficult for a lot of people, and so can being open to feedback. And I've been guilty of the feedback thing myself, and it does take some time to learn when you think you've got the best product or the best solution or the best system on the market, and somebody comes and says, yeah, it doesn't work for me, or no, I don't think that looks right, UX isn't right, UI isn't right, okay, customer experience isn't working, too many clicks, you know. So it can be really soul destroying, but learning to embrace that is a key part of things. And I think, you know, seeing failure as a learning opportunity is really, really good. There was a startup that I used to do recruitment for, so I was massively into recruitment agency work. So I've done startups for household names. So most of you will know Kelly Services in terms of the recruitment company, and Randstad more as the high street brands. And you're thinking, why is Simon calling them a startup? So what I did for Kelly Services is I set up a subsidiary for them called Kelly IT Solutions, which was a specialized IT recruitment division separate from their core business. and we ran like a startup. There was me and one consultant. We looked at building the team out to 12 people, moving from just permanent recruitment into contract recruitment as well. So we built it from scratch. Yes, did I have funding? Yes, I was very well funded because Kelly were a multi-million-dollar company. But I was still treated like a startup founder. I had a budget, I had goals, I had revenue targets, everything from day one. And it was like, how do we scale the team? How do we scale it quickly? How do we make sure we're bringing the right people in? So, you know, I've worked with lots of companies here in Malaysia, and sorry, I went off on a slight tangent there, but regarding the failure part, there's one company here. So they were a startup as well, pretty well funded, called Ringgit Plus. I think they're now called Genexu. I don't know if anybody on the call has heard of them. They do financial solutions. They help banks sell credit cards, etc., loans and whatnot. Anybody heard of them?
Yeah, I heard once, the Ringgit Plus.
Yeah. So they changed their name to Genexu. But the reason I'm telling this story is I met with their CEO to take some requirements, and he wanted a CFO here in Malaysia. And he said, I specifically want somebody from a failed startup. He went, I don't want the most successful CFO in the world from the startup industry. I want to find someone who's failed because I need the resilience. I need the lessons learned because I don't have that information. We do pretty okay, but I know tough times are coming. And he actually asked me, it's not very often you get asked by a client when you're a recruitment agent, can you go and find me someone who's failed at what they're supposed to be doing? So like I say, failure is an important part of the journey. It's how you embrace it and learn from it. Okay. And yeah, finally, emotional agility. So being able to navigate your own emotions, because, you know, it can be quite lonely depending on where you are with your startup. I've worked in small startups where it's been me and the other founder, and, you know, they can be long, lonely days. But yeah, staying calm and making thoughtful decisions. And like I say, don't rush. I think what we see with a lot of startups, especially people like yourselves going through cohorts, looking for angels or looking for seed. I don't think anybody's at sort of round A, round B funding yet. But yeah, I remember the first time we got offered some money, and it was like, you know, you just want to snap people's hands off. So making thoughtful decisions, it's not always about getting money. You know, you need to make sure, and I'm sure throughout the cohorts, you'll be looking at your strengthening your pitch decks, but just looking at what type of investment you need, where there can be flexibility in terms of numbers or equity and ROI, etc. Okay. Any questions? All right, you're making this really easy. Okay, so overcoming founder challenges. Startup founders often face, imposter syndrome. So yeah, doubting your own ability or feeling like a fraud. So this is something I've been through very recently myself. So I've retired from the corporate world now. I'm an old man, I'm 49 years old. Anyone can feel free to jump in and say I look a lot younger. That'd be really nice. But yeah, what I've done is I'm doing fractional work now. So I'm doing some work with Beyond 4. I do some fractional work for other startups outside of the cohorts in terms of companies that want to put in talent acquisition and HR functions, but need it on a fractional basis rather than taking in a HR director or a CHRO. But in my spare time, I decided that I wanted to be a personal trainer. So I actually qualified late last year. And now I'm doing personal training part-time as well. But yeah, the amount of imposter syndrome I had, I'm like, you know, do I look fit enough? Are people going to want to work with me? What do my sessions look like when I'm coaching people? And it's like, you know, it took me quite a few sessions to get comfortable with it. But it's something that we all have. You know, it can be reading your own business card when you hand it to someone, or having a look at your LinkedIn profile when you're scrolling through, double checking. It's like, wow, am I really a founder or a co-founder? But you know, you really need to embrace what you're doing. And like I say, I always ask for feedback. Every session I do with my personal training, every session I do with a mentor or coach, I always ask for feedback, and it puts a smile on your face, and it's a little bit of positive reinforcement that you do know what you're talking about, and people that are confident in your ability, which then reinforces you to be confident in your own ability. So I would say, getting around imposter syndrome, do ask for feedback. Yeah, nothing wrong with at the end of a chat with someone, be it a vendor or a potential candidate, saying, you know, what do you think? All right. Decision fatigue. This is probably, I should have put this number one. This is probably the biggest struggle I've seen for most founders and myself. I think my last startup was a recruitment platform called Culture, and we had it was basically an app that sort of flipped recruitment on its head in terms of how the candidates searched for jobs. And they searched by, we spoke briefly earlier on regarding culture, values, environment, mission. So rather than candidates going on to a platform and going, I'm a Java developer with 4 years experience, and I specialize in J2EE, and I've got front end HTML5, blah, blah, blah. They go in and they search by culture first, and then their job experience comes at the bottom. And then all of the companies' profiles are built out like that. So where we had decision fatigue was, we must have had about 200 to 300 options on these drop downs. There was 3 founders involved, myself and my 2 partners in the UK. And I'm not joking, we must have spent 8 hours, 4 2-hour sessions, going through drop downs, going through the iconography, because we wanted icons on it as well. And it was just tedious. And it's something that we've all done startups before, me and my co-founders in that project. And it was something that we should have been able to iron out in an hour or so and agree on, and we couldn't. And I think there's a lot of overthinking now linked to anxiety, physical fatigue. So, you know, try and put timeframes in place. If there's key decisions to be made for the organization, for the app, for the solution, for the service, try and put a fixed time frame in place where it's like, okay, worst case scenario is the decision has to be made by this day, because we didn't. And like I say, a lot of what I talk about is I've made all of these mistakes, so you people don't have to. So I hope this had some value. You know, the decks can be a little bit generic, but these are real life examples of what I've been through as a startup founder and entrepreneur. And then, yeah, burnout. So overworking, poor boundaries. You know, people talk about work-life balance. It is a little bit different when you're a startup founder, because it's like having a child. It's your baby. And I think what you need to do is start looking at, okay, when you can start scaling it back, because you don't want to get burnt out. But at the beginning, you've got lots and lots of energy, but you will see depletion in that as there's more staff, as investors come in, as you've got to start looking at decks and data regarding ROI and things like that. So it's knowing when to pump the brakes, basically. You can't go at 1,000,000 miles an hour forever, but you normally see the pace of a marathon runner. They start off a little bit quicker than they finish. Marathon runner is a good way to look at it. Don't be a sprinter, be a marathon runner. But yeah, have a slightly higher pace at the beginning of your journey and slow down as you get further in. And then that's where to implement those boundaries. Daily mindset rituals, right? So journaling, meditation, or affirmation. So affirmations is what I was speaking about in terms of asking for feedback. Journaling and meditation, I'm not going to be a hypocrite, something I don't do. Don't like writing things down. I'm a sales guy from background, you know, recruitment, TA, still predominantly sales focused, and I have a strong background in sales and BD. So writing's just not for me. You tend to find the best salespeople don't like writing things down, which is why you have sales administrators to do all the paperwork for them, which is a free tip from me. Meditation can be looked at in many different ways. I go for a walk every morning. So I like to walk 30 minutes outdoors. Walking outdoors for me is really important. Okay, if you can't get outdoors, get on a treadmill. But we should all be doing 30 minutes activity every day. The reason I do outdoors, because we've got fresh air and we've got vitamin D. And vitamin D gives you energy. It's also good for your mental health. It's good for anxiety. And I know we're in Asia and it's hot and people don't like walking anywhere. I'm from the UK and we're used to walking everywhere. But if you go out at 7:30, first daylight, you need your daylight. So if you can get out at 7:30 when the sun first comes up, it's not too hot, but you'll see a difference. So when I say that's my meditation, I won't listen to a podcast. I won't listen to music. I won't answer the phone. That is my time. I can write emails in my head. I can have a chat with myself. I can reflect on the day. It could be, mindset rituals in terms of I get up, I drink a litre of water in the morning, then I wait half an hour and I have my 2 coffees. Then I'll go and do my 30-minute walk. Then I'll come back and check my emails. So I don't want to sound like one of these sort of CEO idiots that are on LinkedIn telling people to get up at 5 a.m. every day, but the water's really good in terms of kickstarting your biomechanics. We all know caffeine's good in terms of focus and also helps your metabolism a little bit. So if you go and have a couple of cups of coffee before you go for a walk, you'll probably walk a little bit further, a little bit faster. So there we go in terms of mindset rituals. But again, could be reading. Some people like to read, sit in a quiet space, get a book out. And then, for the people further along in their journey, be it co-founders or team members, delegation and trust, and we'll cover trust a little bit more later on. But we have a saying in the UK, a problem shared is a problem halved. So sometimes there can be things that you think only you can solve, but sometimes you speak to the most unexpected person about it, and they've got a suggestion or an answer. So don't be afraid to share and don't be afraid to delegate. Okay. And then, boundaries around time, energy, and decision making. Sorry?
Actually, Simon, I do have a question on this particular slide. Specifically on imposter syndrome, right? So I think, like you said, it's something that a lot of founders face, and it's something that is very difficult for a lot of founders to address, right?
Yeah.
What, especially in terms of dealing with it, is one part of it. But how do founders approach their everyday so that imposter syndrome doesn't necessarily become something that they constantly had to deal with?
Yeah. So I found the best way of dealing with it was in my interactions. It's always going to be there a tiny little bit. And what you'll see is it creep in every time you achieve something big, right? It could be getting your first round of funding. It could be, winning this cohort. It could be getting an angel. It could be getting a seed. It could be getting to your MVP. It could be getting to your second release. And as soon as you got rid of it, you'll hit another huge milestone or goal, and you'll feel it creep in a little bit again. But like I say, for me, affirmation and feedback. So I ask people for feedback, almost like a verbal survey in terms of, all right, let me use my personal training thing. At the end of each session, how do you feel? How was the training? So it never 100% goes away. But dealing with it for me is more about getting feedback, and that feedback can be from anyone. In terms of, it could be somebody you work with, one of your co-founders, one of your staff. It could be from a vendor. It could be from, potential customer, in terms of how did you find the presentation? What do you think of the product? It could be staff when you're doing their one-to-ones. But it just reinforces. And that's also a good way of, when you look at failure, where am I going wrong? That feedback, if it's positive, it'll help get rid of imposter syndrome. If it's negative, it won't impact your imposter syndrome negatively. But it will give you something to build on.
Got it. I guess the follow-up I would have to that is that in a sense, then it's kind of like as you deal with the situation, it's removing the personability of that feedback. Because I think, especially when I recall myself being a founder, sometimes you're scared of asking for feedback because you think, oh, I'm building the solution. I don't want people to see how bad the solution is at this stage, or I'm very worried that of getting negative feedback. How do you deal with all those different random thoughts swirling around instead of just focusing on, hey, I need feedback?
Yeah, so feedback in terms of if you think you're building something really bad, then you need to have a look at what you're doing. Would be my first point. But yeah, I mean, if it's not as far as long, we have another saying in the UK. You'll probably get lots of these anecdotes today, but never let the truth get in the way of a good story. If you've got a great solution, it's just not as far along as it should be. Talk it up a little bit. But like I say, it's about turning negatives into positives. So, the feedback might be, oh, your presentation wasn't as smooth as I would have hoped, or we would have liked a little bit more data in the deck. All right, that's not really going to increase your imposter syndrome, but you do know that you need to go back and have a look at your deck, and that you do know you probably need to practice your pitching over a couple of times. So like I say, it's about turning negatives into positives. So all feedback is good. A lot of people don't like asking for it. I think you get more positive feedback when you ask for it than when you don't. Right? If you look at, so I'll give you an example. If you go to a lot of hotels or restaurants or whatever, they'll have a complaints book, but they won't have a positive comments book. They'll always leave the complaints book out. So they're just inviting complaints. So if you don't ask for feedback, you won't get any. And if there is negative, you really need to hear it as well as the positive. So I would say never not ask for feedback, because it'll never be completely negative unless something's really, really wrong, and then yeah, it's good to get that before something's too wrong that it can't be fixed. But in general, you'll tend to get bits of positive feedback, and it does help with imposter syndrome. It really does.
Got it. I think Kamal, you have a question, is it?
Yeah, just out of topic, because I think it's imposter syndrome. I do face the same thing. So how do you gain a trust for those, like for new company, right, set up? So how do you gain trust for those are new in the field?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is you have to believe in yourself, and you also need to make sure that you've got a voice. In terms of, this ties into, I used to have what we call posting anxiety. So I'm guessing that 99% of us on this call are using LinkedIn or social media in some way, shape, or form. And there's a massive thing now called posting anxiety, which is, I don't want to write something in case somebody says I sound stupid or look stupid. You just need to go for it. Stupid's probably a strong word, but I was always self-doubting in terms of, I don't want to put an article out there about data center talent acquisition in Cyberjaya and Johor Bahru. What happens if I write something and then there's someone who's a little bit smarter than me? If you know what you're talking about, if you believe in your product and believe in yourself, put it in the public domain, and you will find that you will get far more positive responses than you do negative. And it really, really helps a lot. So we spoke about journaling, right, as a potential mindset ritual. Your journaling could be writing a LinkedIn post. And the good thing is nowadays, writing a LinkedIn post a lot easier because you've got ChatGPT. You choose a topic and never, ever post straight from ChatGPT. Make sure you proofread, change some of the grammar and the vocabulary, because people will spot it's ChatGPT straight away. But like I say, positive reinforcement, get your voice heard. And whether you're doing a masterclass like I'm doing today, or whether you're doing a podcast with somebody, or whether it's LinkedIn posts, you will get positive feedback, and it helps a lot. especially LinkedIn, because you can have so many connections on there, and it does work. So I would say in its simplest form, putting your voice out there and getting positive responses helps you, makes you feel warm and fluffy inside, give you a little smile. We call it certificate smile. Remember when you won a certificate at school when you were younger and you couldn't stop smiling when your head teacher gives it, you're on stage? Well, that's what your LinkedIn post should be doing for you, and your social media stuff and your podcast. And then, yeah, have that little smile while you're having a coffee or a glass of water at home. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this slide?
No, Hafiz here. Basically, I think what you are sharing with us on this slide is very much relevant to, especially to those who are from academics. We've been taught at the university since the first day we joined the university as a lecturer, and before that we have a bachelor degree, master's, and PhD, and so on. It's nothing to do with business, and now we are required to embark into this startup's journey. So it seems like, imposter syndrome, decision fatigue, burnout, everything is very much relevant to us. Those especially in the academics, and then now want to embark into this journey of startups. But I don't know, Simon, if you have heard that many universities, especially in the UK, if you look at Oxford University and many others, their academics, they are also having startups. And maybe if you can dig out, or maybe you can share with us how all these founders at the university, all these professors, they overcome this imposter syndrome, fatigue, burnout. Considering that we are not just doing business, and when we talk about business, it is a 24/7 activities. Whereas for the academics, we have to juggle between academics stuff as well as looking into the business point of view, and then many others. Maybe it becomes making us, some of us become so burnout, and then our study is nothing to do with business in the beginning, and now in the startups we are talking about doing business. We are talking about angel investor, venture capitals, and so on. And next, we are learning about the business model canvas. Maybe, someone, if you can advise us, especially those who are from academics, now joining into the startups, how do we perhaps overcome, or maybe to tone down a little bit our, kind of imposter syndrome, Simon?
Yeah, I don't see anything really related to academics in this. Not imposter syndrome, no. Decision fatigue, no. Burnout, possibly. I mean, you're talking to a guy that I left school at 16 years old. I went straight into business. I went into sales and business development from a very, very young age. I was never academic. I was more a vocational learner. So I learned on the job and did training courses. But yeah, I don't really see imposter syndrome creeping in with people in education and decision fatigue either, because I mean, these are core factors. Imposter syndrome relates to yourself in terms of your career and where you are as a founder, and decision fatigue comes from when you're running a business, and how quickly you can make changes and get them done and provide clarity to make sure that you can go further on your journey. I can't really speak for academics because I've never really been one. In terms of universities in the UK where they've got startup founders and things like this, these are just really, really driven young people. What I would say is a differentiator would be, if you look at universities like Oxford and Cambridge, right, the majority of people that go there come from very, very rich families. So the reason you will see higher percentages of startups from institutions like that is because once they ideate and can get to an MVP, and let's say they're doing a computer science degree, so they can build an MVP themselves. If they go and show it to mummy and daddy or grandma and grandpa at the weekend, they can probably get 500,000 ringgit seed funding, maybe out of their inheritance early. Maybe mummy and daddy just want a side project that they want to invest some money in for their future. But you will see disparity from certain organizations just because of the dynamics of people that study there. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah. I got it.
Yeah, that's it. You know, if little Hugo, there's massive disparity in the UK between rich people and poor people. And yeah, a lot of these people who go to universities, you need a lot of money in the UK, and you need a lot of money anywhere really nowadays. But yeah, you will see that disparity because it's more about them finding funding quickly, but it'll normally be angel. And, you know, when you look at angel would normally be family, friends, or friends of family.
Yeah.
So that's probably why you see that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably really tough trying to finish your degree while you're doing this. But again, you know, that this comes back to sort of setting the boundaries out. If it's not separating work from play, then it's work from study.
Okay. Thanks, Simon.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Cool. All right, let's move on. Okay. So this is sort of where I come into my own now, because I come from a recruitment and talent acquisition background, and as well as employer branding and EVP. So if we look at effective team management, you know, we start off with building the team out. So one thing I would say, and clear roles and accountability is absolutely key. And when I say clear roles, right, so I had a little chat with, I had a little chat with Nash before you guys came into the room today, and I was like, "How's things going, Nash?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm double hatting at the minute, a bit of this, a bit of that, you know, maybe treble hatting." We have to do that in startups, but as you scale and as you grow, you know, if you're looking at your core team in terms of your co-founders, then I would say double hatting and things like that is okay, because it's all hands on pump. There's only 2, 3, or 4 of us. We've all got to wear a few hats. I would say look at what hats you wear and why you're wearing them, and make sure that you're wearing the right hats. In terms of, if there's a group of 3 or 4 of you as founders, then make sure you know who's doing what, and whose strengths are what. In terms of, if you're at a point where you're hiring staff now, the worst thing you can do is hire people without job descriptions, targets. So I know targets is a strong word, and I know Gen Zs hate it, and Gen Alpha would probably just start crying. But people need to know what success looks like. So goals could be success, and, you know, I lean more to OKRs than KPIs and SLAs, and we'll double down on that later. But I would say, you know, you can still have clear roles without job descriptions if it's for your C-suite and your founders and your co-founders. Accountability, you all need a group vision of what success looks like and how you're going to achieve it between you, and then how you divvy up or divide your skill sets to make sure that you can cover all the bases with the fewest amount of people while you need to. When you start hiring real people for real jobs slightly further down the food chain, they need to have clear job descriptions. The reason I say this is because, you know, there's 2 hats to wear here, right? There's the employer hat and the employee hat, and I've been on both sides. If you look at hiring people without job descriptions and without targets, what happens if you have performance management issues? You can't PIPS, if you can't measure it, you can't gauge success, right? So if they don't have targets and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, how are you going to build a case to put them on to give them a show cause letter and put them on a PIP and potentially manage them out of your company? Because I know it sounds horrible, but you will all have to do this at some point in your careers and at some point you start up, and it's not very nice. I've been doing it for the past 30 years and I still don't enjoy it. but there's ways to make it easier. All right. Which leads on to my next point. So trust and transparency, open communication. So psychological safety and mutual respect. Make sure if you're going through interview processes, be that with founders or directors or your C-suite or your developers or your UX, UI guys or whoever, I'm completely open and transparent when I interview people. I like them to get to know me. I like to see if there's a connection from both sides. There's no point in me liking them if they don't like me. So I try and have those open conversations from day one. It doesn't have to be like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den drilling people for data. My interview style is quite open and relaxed, almost more like a chat to start with. There'll be parts of my interviews where you need to get data driven and data oriented, especially if you're looking at, you know, commercial people, sales, etc., where you need to know numbers and ROI and things like that. Or your business insights guys, data and analytics. But yeah, I almost treat my interviews like more like a conversation, and I like to make people relax. So I would say one thing you need to do is get your interviewing technique nailed down. I like to do apple for apple, so I try and judge everybody on the same basis in terms of. So what I do is I design a sheet. So I have a spreadsheet which is formulated, and then basically it covers my company core values, and then it covers company traits and culture. So then what I do is I give everybody a score based on the same things in between, gathering that information from the conversations that I have with them. So I would say get comfortable with interviewing people, and this comes back to imposter syndrome. So whether you need to interview your co-founders or your partner or your mom or someone like that, get comfortable with interviewing and make sure that, you know, body language is good, that your communication's open. And like I say, practice mutual respect. I don't like hierarchy. I speak to people like they're my friend. I don't need to pull hierarchy to get what I need from people. And yeah, next up, empowerment and ownership. And again, this is, you know, once the team's in there, comes back to trust and transparency, right? Everybody should feel respected. They should feel trusted. There's nothing worse than working in an environment where you think people are against you or the boss doesn't like you. So there's a next bit on one of the next couple of slides regarding how I deal with that. But yeah, you need to make sure that there's trust, and this comes back to the psychological well-being and safety. And then, yeah, there's just a little quote there. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I don't think you can actually make a PowerPoint without having a useless quote in there. So there's mine for the day. Any questions on this slide? I'd say these are quite high level. We'll double down. Okay, so building high performing teams. So there's some massive cliches on here, and I do apologize for that, but I mean, they need to be heard because they're things that you need to hear, and you'll hear people saying over and over again. So yeah, to build a strong committed team, hire for attitude, train for skill. Look, everything with a pinch of salt. The way I look at this, and it comes back to hiring methodologies and, you know, being able to measure apple for apple. Attitude's one thing, and yeah, prioritizing growth mindset, that's great, and grit, but they still need experience. So depending on the role, you know, I normally look at a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split in terms of, if I'm interviewing someone, if they tick 100% of the boxes on my job description, they're overqualified. What are they going to learn? Why are they going to stay? That's how I think when I'm interviewing people. This person might want to come here for the money or because we're exciting, but they can't tell me what they want to do. They can already do 100% of the job, and I've not got another job to promote them into. So why? Whereas if I speak to someone who's got 60%, in terms of core skills, mandatory skills. And then on all of my nice to have skills, they're sort of there or thereabouts, 60%, 70%. That's a perfect hire for me. If their mindset, that's when mindset comes in. Once they tick the 60 to 70% of the core skills box, the other 30, 40% is the mindset, grit, and alignment in terms of the company and experience. So that's one thing to keep in mind. A lot of companies fail with hiring and don't hire fast enough, which creates a bad candidate experience, which then impacts your employer brand, which means people won't apply for your job. So you'll have to spend more money on adverts and, you know, LinkedIn and Facebook and whatnot. So, you know, this all fits into your employer brand and candidate experience in terms of being slow, interviewing too many people, looking for someone who's 100% of the job description. It impacts you massively on the market. You know, you've got forums in Malaysia like Laoyat Forum, is it? A lot of tech guys on there. The things that they say about companies that they've interviewed for, where they've not got a job or not got feedback, it's very powerful. And then, of course, you've got Glassdoor, which is basically TripAdvisor for companies. And people can go on there anonymously and say whatever they want about you. And that could be a disgruntled employee who's left. It could be someone who's been through the interview process and not heard back, been ghosted. So you've always got to keep in mind the impact outside of what you're doing in that interview room in terms of employer brand. All right. The fostering psychological safety, already what we just covered. Make sure people feel free to speak up and safe to speak up and challenge ideas. I worked in the Czech Republic for almost 10 years. So that was a communist country. And the kids over there, they went to school and they get told everything. Just told. There's no, has anyone got a question? Somebody put their hand up. Johnny, what do you think about this? Please, what do you think about that? It's basically, this is it. That's the fact. Write it down, learn it. Next fact. So you need to create an environment, you know, if you're more of a tech company, but it doesn't matter whether you're tech or not. You know, I always used to do a morning scrum, get all my team together, find out what was going on, do a round table, who needs help, can another member of the team help, do they need my help? But getting people to a place, and it's easier to get them there if they're doing it in a room full of their peers to start with, rather than just one-on-one with you. So I would encourage scrums when you've got younger teams who are probably, sometimes, you know, they got the answer and they won't say it because they're just talking to boss. Okay. Diversity and inclusion, big topic at the moment, giving our friend in the US aid, saying that there's only 2 genders. I know it's a very sensitive topic in Malaysia, given, you know, we're a Muslim/multicultural country, sorry. But yeah, I mean, diversity and innovation and inclusion comes in all different ways, shapes and form. That could be socio-economic. It could be the difference between Indian Malaysian, Chinese Malaysian, Malay. It could be the difference of having a big, horrible Mat Salleh like me on the team. You know, it doesn't always have to be people identifying as cats and whatnot. It needs to be taken with a little bit of pinch of salt and used sensibly. But yeah, some of the best teams I've worked in Malaysia, I've been to companies to recruit for them, and it's we only want an Indian Malaysian guy because all of the rest of the team is Indian and no one else will fit in. And the same, I go to places and everybody orang China, and it's like, yeah, we only want Chinese people, and they'll always say, oh, we need a Mandarin speaker, and it's not. They just want Chinese person because everybody else is Chinese. So, you know, take those things into account, because you have what's called groupthink, right? Where everybody thinks the same. There's no diversity in their backgrounds, their educational levels, what they've done, socioeconomic, etc. There's lots and lots of elements to this, but like I say, always interview people and judge people on their opinions and their knowledge, not on where they come from or what they look like. And then, yeah, going back to, you know, we always celebrate wins, but yeah, failures can be celebrated as well. Depends how bad the failure is. I heard a really good quote of somebody the other day. I'd love to remember who it was. I can remember the quote. I can't remember the person. They said, "I've never failed. I've gotten things wrong a few hundred times before I found the right way to do it, but I've never failed." And that's a really, really resilient way to look at setbacks. Failures, I'd say. Look at science experiments. How many times do people have to experiment before they always get things right? You won't always get things right first time. So sometimes celebrating the failure, finding out what was wrong, not necessarily knowing how to fix it, but finding out that something's wrong and that it would never have worked is just as powerful, right? Because if you hadn't found out and you just carried on working and working and working on that, then it's not good. So yeah, you can celebrate failures, because sometimes it leads to, well, I would say 99% of the time, it leads to success. Okay, any questions around this slide? Nope. Okay, then
I guess one question I would like to ask here, Simon, is the quote that you shared is pretty interesting, right? I think that's a Thomas Edison quote, right? Like, you figure out everything that doesn't work, so all that's left is things that do work. But especially in the moment, in the stress of a startup experience where you have all that pressure to succeed, right? And things don't go the right way. How do you constantly stay on the right mindset where, hey, it's all right, this is part of the journey, as opposed to, oh no, this is something that's derailing my journey per se?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is exactly the way to look at it. Like I say, is you've got to see things getting broken or not working right as it's a challenge. It's a cognitive workout. How do we fix it? Like I say, finding out that it's broke is a win in itself, or that it's not going to work, because you're saving yourself time. So like I say, you have to put positive spins on what look like negative outcomes, because they don't stay negative for long. I'm coming from, it's we could have, look at the win. So let's say, okay, we're doing a new customer experience. We're going to change the payment gateway. We're going to do this. I'm right. You spend 2 or 3 weeks doing it, right? You're on with the product managers from the payment gateway. You've tried everything. They don't want to tell you it'll never work because they're trying to get money out you for the integration, right? And then somebody comes along, you get one of your co-founders, or you hire a new dev, and they have a look at it and they go, that'll never work. And then it's a celebration for the little dev guy who's come along and gone, I've figured that out. And then, as a founder, it might feel like, how did we not spot this? That's a lose. It's not a loss. It's a win for the team, because somebody who you've hired, part of your team, has come and figured it out. Because sometimes 2 brains, 3 brains, 4 brains are better than none. And the celebration, the positivity should have come is, if you hadn't have spotted that, these guys would have been leading us down a path for the next 6 months, more money, more development, more integration costs, and it still wouldn't work, and we'd have to start again. So it's about, like I say, it's about putting a positive spin on things.
Got it. Okay. Especially when you have your own employees as well, not just yourself, that you have to keep in line. Is the approach the same?
Yeah, most definitely. I think, there's a part on communication coming up. But yeah, I mean, you can get very, very frustrated. But it's how you're perceived in public. And yeah, there's been times where I wanted to tell people that they're an idiot and that they've wasted my time. But you're not going to get anything back from that, apart from they'll just want to leave. So, part of being a founder and a leader is keeping your team motivated through thick and thin. And that will come through your persona, how you carry yourself, how you deal with failure. Because at the end of the day, you're the captain of the ship, right? And people will do what they see. So, part of building your own resilience as a co-founder is how you keep people motivated through those hard times. And, again, let's say it's a developer that's gone through that API journey and then he's figured out himself. If he come to me and said, oh, I'm sorry, Simon, you know, I've just wasted 20,000 ringgit and 2 months work of dev work on that, and I don't think it's ever going to work, I think we should just pull the plug on it. It'd be like, you know what, thank you, because you could have just kept going and going there infinitely and wasted more money and more time. So thank you and kudos to you for holding your hands up and admitting that it isn't going to work. Now what we have to do is sit around with the rest of the team and figure out as a group how we're going to fix it. So you can still motivate your team even when they fail, right? People don't have to be scolded. There's always positives to take out of everything. But this is, you know, when we talk about a leadership mindset and a founder's mindset, this is what it's about. I use that positivity and I can have those conversations. And yeah, if it's a negative conversation, again, it's about how you communicate that. Communication's really, really important. So yeah, I don't think I've ever scolded anyone in Malaysia. I've had some what I'd call courageous conversations. It's all about the semantics, right? So, you know, it'll be like, but I'd still try and make them productive rather than just telling someone you've done bad. It'd be like, okay, that's gone wrong. What do we need to do to make sure that things like this don't happen in the future? Are there some things that we can put in place to protect you and to protect us, so that we don't get to a part of the journey where it's like, oh, we've gone a little bit far or spent a little bit too money? Do you need to have and again, it'll be in the comms part next, so I won't dwell on it too much right now. But for me, it's about check-ins and speaking to people, because most of these things can be caught and dealt with from a leadership perspective in terms of coaching and mentoring one-to-ones, which will be coming up in a slide or two.
All right. Thanks, Simon.
Okay. Cool. All right, I'll move on. So here we go. So basically the next slide. So yeah, key strategies to enhance productivity. We all know agile and prioritization. Prioritization, you know, agile is agile. So some people don't practice it. You've got waterfall, you've got all these different methodologies. But agile in this perspective just means fast in terms of, all right, breaking into work sprints. I don't, sometimes prioritizing smaller tasks. So I write a to-do list every day, and I'm old-fashioned. I write it down. I still have a little notepad that I carry everywhere with me. I don't like doing voice notes and stuff like that. Whenever I'm on my laptop, I always have my idea book next to me, and I just like scribbling things down. So sometimes in terms of motivation, getting people moving, I'll tell people to prioritize very, very small tasks that we can sprint into, because it gets your day off, and then it starts snowballing. Then you can sit down and do the stuff that you need to think about without those little niggly things at the back. So, you know, prioritization and speed from that side. And then, yeah, get stuck into the things that are going to take up more of your cognitive bandwidth. You know, they're better off done once you've had a coffee and you've sent them a couple of little emails, which are your work sprints. And then, yeah, block out time. One thing I would say to everybody is I never used to block out my calendar. If I needed to do something, I would just work, and then people would just stick stuff in my calendar or just randomly call me. In terms of prioritization, you need to prioritize yourself in your work sometimes. So do block out your calendar. I used to block out 3 or 4 hours at a time. It'd be like, I don't want disturbing. If I've got no one to speak to and I need to get this done, be it a deck, be it the new pitch deck, be it some code to write, be it a customer experience feedback form to design, be it we want a new logo and we're talking to the branding team, you know, block things out so you get your own work done as well. Because a lot of time people are like, oh, I'm the founder, so my time should be free for people, but you're going to have a lot of your own work to do as well. So when we come back down, when we get down to feedback loops, we'll come into that. Clear OKRs. So have you all heard this phrase, OKRs? in terms of objectives and key results? Yes, no? All right, I'm not going to get an answer. So basically, this is a higher level KPI. So KPI, micromanaging, OKRs, autonomy. So objective could be hire 10 people. Key results could be hire 10 people at X amount of budget within X amount of days. Okay, so we've got the objective, and then the key results are cost, timing, headcount, achievement. Make sure everybody's got measurable goals. KPIs can be taxing for some people. They're always going to be around because in certain roles, and especially if they're revenue generating or revenue sensitive, in terms of it could be something as simple as data entry. If you've not put enough lines of data in for a company that you've agreed to do something for, if you've not got somebody sat there that's got a goal of doing 100 lines a day, or 100, could be 100 anything, or 200, but it could be fields, it could be lines, it could be whatever. Some people need KPIs, some people need OKRs. For me, normally what I do is I would put my management, middle management, senior management, middle management, and team leads on OKRs, and then I would leave it to them to either do diluted versions of my OKRs that I've given to them, or depending on the roles, if it's really sort of transactional work, where we need to get X amount done per day, could be contact center in terms of we need to do 200 callbacks for customer service tickets, etc. Then they will need KPIs. It's inevitable, but yeah, try and avoid them. But they're not the worst thing in the world. Going back up to blocking out time and giving feedback from the last slide. Feedback loops and regular one-to-ones. These are non-negotiable for me. So for me, Mondays was always my day. So it would be Monday morning, first thing in the office, not too early, culturally slightly different if all your workers are at home. But for me, I like going to the office. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday were always my office days. Monday, Tuesday just gives me a good, strong kickoff to the week. Monday, if you just do Monday and then Tuesday off, you lose that momentum that you gain on Monday. So that's why I always did Monday, Tuesday, and then have a Wednesday at home. But for me, it was in the office, 9 o'clock, 9:30, all together, scrum meeting, team one-to-one, call it whatever you want. Everybody on the same page, a little bit of an icebreaker. How was your weekend? Quick one round the table. Then, okay, another round the table. What did we achieve last week? What are we going to try and do this week? Here's some company news. Here's what's going on in my life in terms of what I'll be doing for us. I'm meeting vendor X, vendor Z, blah, blah, blah this week. Just keeps the channels open. Then I had 4 or 5 direct reports. So basically, I would do a half-hour one-to-one with them based on their actual business, their day-to-day. So if I was dealing with salespeople predominantly, so it would be, okay, how are we getting on those roles? What are conversions going to look like? How many candidates have we got? Can we get more candidates? How's our business development initiatives going? Can we bring more roles in? So I would do team first, get everybody on the right page in terms of what we're doing as a group that week, then individuals. I think the largest team I had in terms of direct reports was 17 direct. So when I was with Randstad, it was non-negotiable. I had to do a one-to-one with all of my direct reports. So that took me all day Monday and all day Tuesday, which was horrible, which I only had to do for the first quarter. But it gives you an opportunity to connect with them personally. Always start your one-to-ones off. And again, if you like a little bit of standardization, I used to build a one-to-one form so that I asked everybody pretty much the same thing. So if people are doing different jobs, it's a little bit more difficult. But if they predominantly got the same skill sets, let's use sales as an example, then you know how many meetings you got booked, how many calls you're going to make, how many conversions did we get from last week, what's the revenue looking like, what's the projected revenue. So I put them in, so I have some standardization, and it's easy to build data points, but I always start off with a very soft personal approach. Just get humanized with them, you'll get better information and build better relationships, and then you'll get better retention. They won't turn, they won't move on. And like you say, faster growth, foster growth, and building trust, which is the most important thing. If you've got a team that trusts you, and you trust them, then you'll be good to go. Retention is a really, really important thing, not losing staff, because it can impact your employer brand. And hiring is cutthroat. There's more jobs than people out there now. I know people are like, oh, I still can't find a job in Malaysia. If you go on the job boards, LinkedIn, JobStreet, Hiredly, Glassdoor, all the other ones, there's literally millions of jobs. There's more jobs than people. The reason people are struggling to hire is because they're too fussy. And, you know, we go back to my 60-40 or 70-30 methodology. And then, yeah, finally, avoid micromanaging. So this one, I've put it in because at the level you guys are at now, you're probably going to be looking for co-founders and directors, I'm guessing. And those people won't want micromanaging. They'll need some autonomy, right? And then, you know, you go back to your OKRs, what's expected of me, what's the objective, what's the key result, what are the time frames involved. I do have people that have worked for me in the past that had absolutely no autonomy, and didn't want any, and preferred me to do a daily check-in with them, first 5 minutes in a day. How do we, you know, basically drip feed them, and just give them a day's worth of work to do at a time. So luckily for me, it was transactional work. So it would be, okay, I need you to find 5 CVs. Here's the job description. Let's go and find 5 CVs for this today. I'd have some people that'd be like, right, we want to be doing 5 CVs a week. So 5 CVs a day over the week, 25. Let's have a look at your one-to-one next week. Some of my staff actually said, I don't want to wait until the end of the week in case I've got a problem. Is it okay if we do a quick 5 minutes every morning just to see, just to check my searches? To, you know, that could be code. For me, it was Boolean strings for finding CVs. But that could be basic code. It could be data entry. Is the format right? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, avoid it with senior people, but always, you know, in the one-to-ones, the feedback loops and the one-to-ones, I always ask people, you know, how do you want your feedback? How do you want to go about this? How do you want to go about your daily work? Are you okay reviewing this on a weekly basis? Do you need to touch base every, you know, for 5 minutes every day? Again, it's not very time effective, but if you do it for a short amount of period, again, this comes back to imposter syndrome and positive reinforcement. If you do that for a couple of weeks, 5 minutes every day with a member of staff for a couple of weeks, and then you see them getting slowly better and better day by day, then it'll be in 2 weeks' time, it'll be, hey, Simon, you know what? We can probably just do the weekly. I think I know what I'm doing now. I don't think I need 5 minutes. Are you happy with everything? If you are, then I am. So again, it builds confidence and trust in them. But I wouldn't say micromanaging is necessarily a bad thing all the time. But get the feedback from your staff in your one-to-ones. Because I just asked them, I said, it's up to you. And that's how we did. Some of them wanted to catch up weekly. 2 of the more junior staff that only had 1 or 2 years experience, that hadn't really worked in the construction industry before, because we were doing real estate and construction technology recruitment. It was just about building their confidence. They know how to find CVs. They know how to write search strings. They just weren't sure about the content of the CVs. So that's what we did. 5 minute touch base every morning. And then, yeah, within 2 weeks, they were good to go. Any questions around maximizing team productivities, around OKRs or doing one-to-ones? Because again, this is where imposter syndrome, any of these practices where you're potentially left one-to-one with someone, and you know that we always say try and hire people that are smarter than you, so you don't have to do as much and you can learn. You know, sitting down with someone who doesn't have the same skill set as you and asking them about their work, you can feel like an imposter sometimes. And the same when you're setting goals and objectives. So, you know, all of this ties in. It's secular.
So Simon, we just did a short poll just to see generally where the founders were in terms of understanding of OKR. And 5 out of 6 probably don't have a strong understanding of OKRs per se. What resources would you recommend for founders to then get a better handle on how they would implement OKRs or explore how they could integrate OKRs to the organization?
Okay, so all we look at is an OKR. I wish I had my whiteboard with me. I'm an absolute, I love being in the office and I love my whiteboard. So the easiest way to look at it is basically OKRs are like KPIs on steroids. So I'll explain this, right? So if we go, right, so I'll give you a direct comparison with the same outcome or the same result wanted, but the difference between an OKR and a KPI, would that help?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I normally draw them as funnels on the board, on a whiteboard, but I can't do that today. And I've not got one of them fancy computers where I can use my Apple pen to scribble on the screen. So you're going to have to bear with me and let me describe it, right? So let's say I'll use recruitment because it's the easiest for me and everybody's got different businesses and recruitment's pretty simple, right? Find CVs, make placements, make revenue. All right. Are we all? Please just give me a couple of verbal nods here, right? So this is what we're going to use. We're going to use a recruitment agency. So we're a recruitment agency guy, sat on a desk, and right. So if it's a senior guy or girl, I use guy as a collective term, right? An OKR for a senior recruitment agent would be, okay, objectives, make placements, right? Put bums on seats. So it could be find CVs, make placements, generate revenue. And then X amount of revenue in X amount of time. So let's say my guys were on 100,000 ringgit in 3 months. If we wanted to put a monetary there to make 30,000 ringgit a month. Okay. So that's very clear and basic, right? Find CVs, make placements, generate 100,000 ringgit in 3 months, in a quarter. Okay. All right, everybody, understood? Maybe write these 3 things down in your notepad just as a list like that. And then next to them, write this. Nash, we okay?
All good, Simon. I think that clears it up, at least up front.
We've got those very, very simple objectives, and the key result is make sure you make 100,000 ringgit in 3 months. Okay, and all you're going to do is find CVs and make placements, and then get that revenue for me. Okay. Now, if you are following my instructions here and you are writing this down, on the KPI side of that, same job, same outcome, 100K in 3 months. But then from a KPI perspective, key performance indicators, right? Your KPIs would look like this, because what you do is you work back up the funnel. So what do we need to do to get 100K in 3 months? So you would go, all right, from experience, if a recruiter, so here's your KPIs, you make 50 calls a week. That's 1. Out of those 50 calls, you have to get 5 BD meetings. Then you have to send 3 CVs every day to a client. Out of your 3 CVs, 1 of those CVs needs to convert into an interview. When you've sent 9 CVs, you need 3 interviews. Then out of those 3 interviews, one of them needs to convert to a deal. And if you work on that big funnel of calls, meetings, BD, CV sent, placement, then that will equal your 100K in 3 months. Because what you're doing with KPIs is building them a framework of what they should be doing in terms of you've looked at all the data points and going on average, a decent recruiter will need to make X amount of calls, he'll need to do X amount of meetings, and he'll need to send X amount of CVs to make that money. So OKR, basically find CVs, make the placements, make the money. KPIs, you need to do X amount of calls with X amount of meetings and send X amount of CVs and convert 3 CVs. It's just a massive sales funnel, KPIs. Whereas an OKR is like a beaker. You've got 1 or 2 objectives in the front and 1 or 2 key results coming out the bottom. You're not breaking it down. So that's the difference between an OKR. It's a very, very simplified form of a KPI, which gives people autonomy. And again, so I would have people when I was at Randstad that could go and make 5 calls in a week and get 5 meetings and send 2 CVs and still hit their 100K. And I would have people that would have to religiously do their 50 calls and 10 meetings and 3 CVs a day and X this and Y that and Z the other to get to that same number. Because one of the guys was more senior, he was completely autonomous, and the other people were slightly more junior and they needed the direction in terms of, well, 100K sounds like a lot of money, I'm never going to do that. So by giving them the KPIs in terms of, I'll guarantee you, if you make 50 calls a week, you'll convert 10% of them, which means you'll get 5 meetings. If you send 9 CVs a week or a day, you work on a 3-3-3, 9 CVs, 3 interviews, 1 placement. So all you're doing is giving them very, very detailed ways of work in terms of what they need to do to get to that, rather than an OKR where you're giving them autonomy to basically achieve the result how they like. I think that's the simplest way I can explain it.
Got it. I think that makes sense. Pretty easy to understand. Is everyone else clear on the difference? You can react through chat, through thumbs ups or something along those lines, so we know what your thoughts are, guys.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing to do is literally there's so much online regarding OKRs versus KPIs, because it's still a big thing. A lot of companies still don't like going to OKRs because they don't have the staff with the autonomy to do it. And then you've got, you know, let's say Gen Z is probably going to be Gen Alpha soon. Are going to be, I don't want to make 50 calls a day and send this and do that. Why can't I just try and make 100K? So there's so much online. If you just Google OKRs versus KPIs, there's so much literature across HR sites. So if you didn't understand how I explained it, although I did think I did an amazing job, just Google it, because there's so much on this topic. And I mean, you can drill down a little bit more. And again, it's like junior staff versus senior staff. Depends whether, if you're working in a fully sort of matrix driven BPO, SSC, and there's huge service level agreements with, penalties involved with vendors and customers, you probably don't want everyone on OKRs. You probably need everybody on KPIs. So some of the literature out there on it can actually put some perspective in terms of where they actually work better. But I'd say from a founder, co-founder, senior management, OKRs are normally all right, as long as the key result is the important thing. And again, make sure that that we're using smart targets for the key results instead of in terms of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Don't just put 100K. Yeah, because OKRs are GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, right? Any of the tech people on here will know that. If the objectives don't look right, the key results won't be there. So make sure, you know, everything is clearly defined. It could be implement our new payment gateway API. Yeah, by June. Right. So that's it. Objective, implement the payment gateway. Key result, have that done by June. That's an OKR. Right. The KPI for that would be utilizing a team of 5 developers, make sure we're doing at least 2 rounds of UAT per day, blah, 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 X amount of code done. Need to have 1 weekly meeting with the API provider, so on and so on. That's the difference. Real good?
All good.
Okay. Yep. All right. I'm moving on. Okay. We might actually do the 2 hours. All right. Why communication is your superpower. So we've spoken quite a lot about communication when we've been going through sort of the hiring and the one-to-ones and maximizing. But yeah, I mean, storytelling's a big thing. Compelling stories make a bigger impact. You know, if you do have data points to get across, try and tell them, you know, in a story with your journey, your purpose, and in a way that inspires. There is a statistic, and I don't like using internet statistics because you know that 90% of the statistics on the internet are actually made up. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said that. 60%, they reckon, more people engage and retain information through gaining data points through a story or a journey rather than being presented a deck full of data. All right, so, you know, storytelling, say it could be your journey, it could be how you devised the product, why you wanted to. You're going to be telling many different stories to different people. It could be, you know, why you came up with that name for your brand, why you decided to do that type of product, and that could be talking to someone that you're pitching, that could be talking to a potential co-founder. You know, you could be telling your story of how you got from being an MVP to in your round A funding and a multi-million-dollar company. And again, that could be to attract staff, that could be on a podcast. But let's say if you're going to get your data points in there, make sure you can tell stories and how you build on your journey and squeeze those data points in. All right. My favorite, radical candor. We have to be honest. So, you know, we spoke about this before, not scolding people, letting people know when you're disappointed. More importantly, letting people know when you're happy, right? I've worked with some people who are like, oh, I don't want to smile, or I don't want to go and high five someone over that because they'll think the job's done and that we don't need to work any harder and I need a bit more out of them and I need a push. And it's like that. What a horrible way to conduct yourself by not celebrating something that is quite substantial. And again, you have people who are too candid in terms of what we'd call scolding in Malaysia. So do be honest, just be honest and open safely and securely and as nicely as possible, whether it's negative or positive. But yeah, don't hide wins thinking it will generate more output, because sometimes people need to know that they're doing a good job. You know, when I had my junior recruiters, you know, even for them, okay, I asked you to get me 3 CVs for this today and they've done it. That's a little high five as far as I'm concerned. Or it could just be really well done. Let's see if we can do the same tomorrow. Or you can go down the, you know, you go down the Carnegie. It was him in the factory, right, where where he wrote the numbers on the floor. So I think he wrote 1 on the first day. How many do you do per hour? 1. Then the next day he just wrote 2 and everybody started doing 2. Next day he wrote 3 and everybody started doing 3 until they hit sort of critical mass at like 5 or 6. But initially people were doing 1 per hour. So yeah, I'd start my recruiters off on 3 CVs a day, and then it'd be like, do you reckon we can get 3, maybe 4 tomorrow? And then it'd be like, I reckon we can be doing 5 a day now. And it's a really, really good way, give it in positive feedback to improve productivity and build trust. Okay, adapting your style. So this is something I've had to do a lot. People don't come out of cookie cutters. Everybody's different. And like when we were talking about one-to-ones and whatnot, and I'd ask people one for feedback, and then ask them, how do you like being managed? What works for you? Do you like a check-in here, check-in that? Some people like, just give it me straight. Other people are like, you know, do we have to talk about business straight away? Can we not have a little chat about the weekend? Everybody is different. You can't treat them like they're robots, like they come out machines. So you do need to adapt your style. And that comes down to you as well in terms of your emotional EQ, right? There needs to be sympathy and empathy, most definitely, because you'll gain more trust, and it just makes your life a lot easier when you have that level of relationship with your staff. So yeah, you don't want to be one of those bosses where everyone's always a horrible man, like a Elon Musk, or what's his name, Zuckerberg, right? Where it's like, oh, look busy, the boss is coming, always horrible to everybody. Really shouldn't be like that, especially in smaller companies. And I hate, I don't like using the, oh, we're like a family. Yeah, you'd never ask your family to work late or work for nothing, would you? And it, that can blur lines. But yeah, being a close-knit small company, you have to build personal relationships. You can't rely on mass emails from HR. So you do need to get to know your staff, and you do need to adapt your style. And then, yeah, listening, the one that no one likes to do, although you've just sat and listened to me for the best part of an hour and a half. Like I say, when I do my team meetings, when I do my one-to-ones, when I do board meetings, when I'm talking to suppliers, vendors, customers, active listening is really important. Just from respect, and again, when we say active listening, actually listening, pausing, and then recognition in terms of, I understand what you're saying. One thing I would say is important in active listening: if you ask a question that you can't answer, you never need to answer a question on the spot. You can always say, I do know that information, but it's not at my fingertips right now. Do me a favor, when I get back to the office, give me a couple of hours and I'll email that information over for you. So, never you don't want to look stupid, and I don't like the word stupid, but if you are in a situation where you're getting asked questions and it's maybe, okay, I wish the CTO was with me, or I wish our sales engineer was with me, or the integration company that we're going to be using, and you're on your own, because there will be times where you're in a situation where you'll be in a meeting where you're supposed to have a wingman or wing lady, and they're not there, and you don't have the answer to the questions. But yeah, never say you don't know. Just say you do know. You just don't have that information at your fingertips. That's a really important part of active listening, because I've been caught out a few times when I think I know it all, and I don't. Okay. Any questions around impactful communication and what we've said here? I'll take that as a no. We're nearly there now, guys. All right. So, understanding yourself. So knowing yourself leads to lead others better. So these are very siloed, but we'll just quickly have a, I'll tell you from my perspective, right? look at people in your company or companies you've worked with, and you'll spot them, right? CEO, driver, fast-paced, goal-focused, direct, always CEO. Analytical, this will be two people. So this will be your CFO, and this is probably your CTO, depending on which side of the technology table he comes from. Amiable, this will be your CHRO, that's your HR, your talent acquisition focused people. Expressive, energetic, creative, big picture thinker, it's probably your CMO, could potentially be your CTO as well, depending on how they view technology and whether they've come from a hardcore dev background themselves, and they're probably the key contributor if you're running a tech platform. But yeah, reflect on how your style helps or hinders you in different situations. And again, if you're looking at co-founders, sometimes you might not have to sit down with everybody. Sometimes that's a conversation that maybe is better for someone else to handle because the person's overly sensitive or over aggressive. You know, the reason we have core teams is so that we can make sure that we can cover everything. All right. As a founder or a co-founder on your own, well, you won't be a co-founder on your own, but as a founder on your own, all right, you're going to have to learn to deal with everything. As you build your core team out, be that C-suite, senior management or co-founders, then look at people when you're selecting your core team, look at people that have 60 to 70% the core skills that you need and 30 to 40% traits that you don't have. And that could be personality traits, people traits, situational traits, okay? Because the idea is that, you know, you can cover all bases between your core team. And then, yeah, develop the skill to flex. So, I mean, you know, you can learn how to communicate in these ways, be that through coaching, it could be through public speaking opportunities, you know, just really, really focusing on your communication style. But yeah, I mean, motivation and coaching and influencing others is really, really important to me. And, you know, I do it across these cohorts. I have staff that have worked for me 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago, still call me up. I've got an issue at work. Can you help me out with this? I'm doing some fractional work for other companies. But being able to motivate and coach people and give a different perspective. And that's what the rest of your team can do, because there'll always be a little bit of personal bias. You'll always default to factory settings in certain situations, because we're all hardwired. We can learn things, but we're still hardwired. Okay, any questions? Okay, cool. So we spoke about this a little bit. So this is probably what I want you to look at very, very closely, because I said a lot of startups that I've spoken to don't have it because they think they don't need it. Have you got a mission plan? Why you exist beyond just making money, right? So if you look at your pitch decks, if you've not built them yet, then these are 3 slides, potentially 2, that I always have in my pitch decks. So this is basically your mission is how you're going to enrich people's lives, etc., in terms of be that your customers or your staff or whoever. Vision, the future you're building, so where the company's going. Okay, what values you live by. So vision and core values, very, very similar, but it's what you're building and how you're building it. And then, yeah, underpinning your vision with your core values in terms of these core values are what your company stands for, the type of people that you hire. And, you know, if you look at core values, if you Google like top 10 core values, this is where you look at empathy, integrity, innovation, etc., etc. But these are all your core values, are part of your employer brand in terms of your talent attraction in the future, because these are all things that people can look at and will want to know about if when they're making a decision to leave a job to come and work for you. So make sure when you're building your pitch decks and your websites or your social media pages that these three things are there, and start nailing them down. If you've not got them at all, get some. And these can change. I've worked with companies where, you know, 1 year we've started off with mission never normally changes. It can pivot a little bit. Vision can change because you might have shoot-offs and spin-off companies, or you might decide the feedback that you've been getting for the product means that you want to pivot a little bit and tweak its purpose. And your core values should probably remain the same because it's the foundations of what you're built on in terms of your core team, how you were set up, what the beliefs were from day one before you got to 20 people, 30 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and they should predominantly stay the same. Okay, any questions on purpose and values?
I guess one question from me, Simon.
Yeah,
how do
sure.
you test your core values, right? And like validate if they are the right values for you as a startup?
Well, I mean, the core values come from the heart of the company. So they basically come from the founder and the co-founders. So it's basically what you want to be known for. So I remember I went to a really bizarre interview and the guy wrote loads and loads of words on a whiteboard and asked me to choose some as my core values. So it's basically the things that mean the most to you, what you want your company to be known for. So like I say, these could be things, like I say, empathy, innovation, sympathy, I don't know, groundbreaking. But your core values, that they come from, the reason they're called core is because they're the heart of the company. It's what the company's built on. It's basically, you know, when I talked about my hiring methodologies, right? Okay, so let's use empathy, right? So let's say when I have my little sheet and I've got 5 core values and my first core value is empathy. When I'm interviewing someone, okay, I would base a question around empathy to see how they're a cultural fit. So it makes sure that we're bringing people in that are aligned. So for empathy, it could be, give me an example of one of your team failed at something. You know, how did you sit down and go through this with them? And then what was the outcome and the solution? And then it's like, you know, oh, I scolded them and I just put them on a pip and then they left anyway. That's not really displaying empathy, is it? Now, if that person said, well, I sat down with them, I explained, you know, I've had a look at the code and I've had a look where it went wrong, or, you know, look, you should have reached out. Let's make sure next time, let's put some milestones in place so we don't do too much work before we realize it's not going to go correct. And then the outcome of that was we put a weekly cadence call in place with the product team, and then we never had an issue ever again. So that's a great display of empathy. So if you as a founder want your leadership team and your co-founders to be empathetic because that's how you operate, and you want to see that from the rest of your team, and that empathy then goes from consumer brand, how you deal with your customers, employer brand, how that empathy attracts potential employees, and then personal brand in terms of how your staff are dealing with internal and internal interactions. That's a good display. So choose your core values around. Don't Google the top 10 and then just pick them. It needs to be what's important to you.
Okay.
Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Sorry, Simon?
Do you understand what I mean in terms of core values and where they should be born from?
Yeah, makes a lot more sense now.
That's it's what's important to you, and you will see. You probably, I bet, if you Google 10 companies, you will probably see between 6, 7, or 8 of them have either identical or 4 out of their 6 all shared, because people tend to go for the same ones, and that there's a good reason for that. It's because they're normally important. Well, like I say, in terms of empathy, integrity, trust, it could be calculated risk, things like that.
Makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so got some good news. We're nearly done. So yeah, I mean, in terms of founders, and we don't need to do a round table on this, but these are the questions I'd be asking myself. What's one mindset shift I need to make? And when I say need, it's like, what's hit you today that you think, I don't do that, or my company's not got that? And it could be, oh, I don't do one-to-ones with my staff, or I don't do a weekly scrum, or it could be, oh, I don't communicate. I have a cookie cutter and I send an email blast every week with updates. Supporting and empowering, that's going to come down to your one-to-ones, and it could be down to your OKRs as well in terms of empowerment. Support, just give them face time would be my response. And then, yeah, leveling up your communication. For me, that comes with practice, because like I say, we're still all a little bit guilty of the imposter syndrome, but the more you speak to people, the more comfortable you become with it, and you'd be surprised how quickly it goes away. So I would say just make sure you're having face time with people. I don't mean spend 30 hours out your 40, 50, 60-hour week chit-chatting to people. But, I have non-negotiable, mandatory one-to-ones with my teams, and the same with the team meeting. And they're every week, and some of them can be 15 minutes. I put 30 minutes in for most people. Some of them could be 15 minutes because people don't have any headaches and they're happy and they're autonomous. Some people will take their full 30 minutes because they need some validation and affirmation. But these are the things to have a look at. Just sort of, do a little SWOT analysis on yourself. If you've not been asking for feedback, maybe, get some. And you could use these questions, how do you think I could lead more effectively? Anything I can do for you? What could I better do to support you and empower you? How do you think my communication skills are? Build yourself a little survey monkey, but do it orally. Don't send them out. Don't email them.
Okay.
All right. And that's it from me. No Q&A, I hope, because I'm still open to questions. Don't worry, we've still got time. But I prefer to do the questions. And yeah, maybe Nash, if you're doing a little survey after, mate, I'd like to know what resonated most. I'd say we don't have to do it now because we're a little bit time sensitive, but I am open to questions if anybody has anything else.
Hi, Simon.
Hello.
Hi. So I have a question regarding the styles of communication. You showed us 4 styles, right? So in a company, there will be like multiple generations, like Gen Z, millennial, and probably boomers. So do we adapt those communication styles according to their generations or their personality? So yeah.
Well, generation, I mean, it'll have to be a mixture of both. I mean, generationally, you will see traits, and thank you for throwing boomers in on my behalf. You will see traits you'll see generational traits, but obviously we're all individuals. So I wouldn't like to group people together by sort of 9-year generation sets. So it would be a mixture. It'd have to be like an X on a grid type thing, in terms of you'd have to look at where generation meets their personality types. I think what you find with boomers and probably Gen X, your communication could be a little bit sterner, not as many snowflakes. Whereas but again, it'll be different for me than it is for you, because probably am a boomer. Maybe I was born in 76. I don't know what that makes me. Gen X, maybe cusp of millennial. I don't know. But the way I have conversations with people in my peer group versus how I deal with when I've got 23-year-old female staff, completely different form. So like I say, you have to sort of feel your way through these things. And that's why I say, you know, doing one-to-ones and getting to know people, because there's always exceptions to the rule. I don't think I communicate like a boomer. I can have some nice, really open, flowing, politically correct conversations. So it will be a little bit different for everyone that you speak to. But yeah, it'd be an X graph in terms of generation meets personality.
All right. Does that cover your question, Carol?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Opening the floor to anyone else who may have any questions.
Hello, Simon.
Oh,
So I'm not sure it's it's valid or not. So I'm currently kind of having problems in delivering effective communications. So let's say I have a visions, right? So I need to motivate and also giving the same vision for all these teams. I know it's a most people would say communications, but I would like to know more. What are the things that I can do better for me to deliver the visions, at least have the same directions for the team.
yeah. From my perspective, this comes back to the slide that we had on sort of mission and vision and core values. I think you need to be completely aligned. You probably need to look at some of your marketing or branding material or your website, and then also in terms of the staff that you have, the storytelling during interviews. Just make sure that your communication is consistent. And again, when we look at sort of employer branding, there's also employee advocacy in terms of what your staff are saying about yourself, the company in the open domain. One of the biggest attraction points for companies when they're looking at hiring can be personal brand. They will always go and look at LinkedIn or on such and such to see what people are saying about you and what the staff, and you can normally tell how happy people are from what type of stuff they post on social media / LinkedIn. But yeah, I would say consistency and some standardization in terms of what goes on your website, what's shared when you're speaking to people you're interviewing, and then people in terms of your weekly meetings, because sometimes we have to have as a brand, as a company, you have to have a sort of one size fits all. That's what your core values and your culture is all about. So I would just like to say design and define or refine your mission, your vision, and your culture blueprint, if you want to call it a culture blueprint, or your values. That would be how I would go about it.
All right, thank you for that.
All right.
Cool. Anybody else?
All right. I'll take that as no further questions. First of all, I would like to extend a huge thank you to you, Simon. Really appreciate the session. Very informational. Really enjoyed today's session. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, mate. And always a pleasure. Like I say, I like working with you guys, and I like getting to meet all of the founders and co-founders and whatnot. It's really, really good. Looking forward. Hopefully, I'll get a little trip over to Pahang to do one of the physicals, because I really like getting out and meeting the guys. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody will have my email or whatnot off the website. So if there is any other questions, you can reach out either directly to me or via Nash.